Board Chair.
Welcome everybody to this public forum that we look forward to really invite you and hear from you all the questions, concerns or remarks you may have. For us, this public forum is the opportunity to hear from you in a way that we otherwise wouldn't. And in particular in this time, it's the opportunity to make sure that we hear things that we wouldn't hear outside of meetings. So listening to you, and let's make this the best of all. I'll hand it over to Herb Way to say a few words about expected standards of behavior.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Herb Way, and I am the ICANN Ombuds. My colleague, Barb Kerwin, Adjunct Ombuds, and I welcome you to the ICANN 72 Virtual Public Forum. We can be reached at any time, of course, at ombudsman@icann.org. Our role is to ensure that the ICANN community is treated fairly and that everyone can enjoy a professional and respectful environment. Virtual participation has long been a necessary and useful way for the ICANN community to take part in the multi-stakeholder process. While virtual participation can be a good proxy for in-person meetings, some interactions do not translate as easily online. We are all entitled to expect professionalism and courtesy when engaging with ICANN in all formats. The Office of the Ombudsman would like to remind you that ICANN's expected standards of behavior govern all aspects of interaction between participants in ICANN activities, including verbal, visual, and written communication. I invite you all to read a recent blog posting I published regarding respectful participation in a virtual environment. The link is posted in the Conversation Discussion tab on the ICANN 72 homepage. And with that, I wish you all a professional and respectful public forum. Thank you, stay safe, and be kind. Sally?
Thanks very much, Herb. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sally Newell-Cohen, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Communications and Language Services at ICANN.org. I'm going to briefly explain the format of the session and how you can participate. Today's public forum will be divided into 3 25-minute blocks. All 3 blocks are open to any subject of community interest. Each block will be facilitated by a board shepherd, starting with Marika Kau, followed by Lido Ibarra, and then rounded out by Ron Da Silva. During each block, you can join the virtual queue in one of 2 ways. If you want to ask a question or make a comment verbally, please click on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and you'll automatically go into the speaker's queue. Once you're introduced by the board shepherd, please be sure that you've unmuted your microphone. And before you begin your comment or question, please be sure to state your name, where you're from, and your affiliation, who you're affiliated with, if it's applicable. And remember, please, to speak slowly so that the scribes and the interpreters can correctly capture your words. If you're unable to voice your question or comment or choose not to, please write it in the Zoom Q&A pod. My colleague, Rachel McFadden, will read it out loud when she's called on. Please don't ask your questions if you want them to be read in the chat pod. We're not tracking the questions there, and your questions won't be read if they're written there. So please be sure, if you want to have a question or comment written aloud, put it in the Q&A pod. And again, when submitting your question or comment in the Q&A pod, it would be helpful if you would include your name, where you're from, and who you're representing or affiliated with again. And we do have time limit rules, as we always do in public forums, and it will be the same as all public forums in this session, 2 minutes, and you will see a 2-minute timer on your screen if you are making your comment or question verbally. We use this time limit just to ensure that we can accommodate for as many questions and comments as possible. The board shepherd will then either respond to your question or comment or turn to the board member who's best equipped to answer your question or comment. I should note at this point that once a question or comment is posed, the board may need a few seconds to determine who's best prepared to respond. So if you could just allow us that time. Please also note that if you have a follow-up question, we ask that you re-enter the queue. This ensures that everyone does still have the opportunity to pose a question or comment. The 2-minute rule will also apply to follow-ups. This session is being interpreted in real time in the standard United Nations languages, which again are Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. The spoken language in Zoom may vary throughout the session depending on who's speaking. So for the best experience, we recommend that you select the language you speak or listen to by clicking on the interpretation icon, located on the Zoom toolbar to the bottom to the right. More details are available on the session page if you have additional questions, and a link is available in the chat as well. With that, we're going to open our first block, and our first board facilitator is Marike Kao. So Marike, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sally. So hello, everyone. My name is Marike Kao, and I would first like to welcome everyone to virtual Seattle. My Zoom background, as some of you may have recognized, is actually the city of Seattle, but without the rain that's been falling the entire week. Seattle may be known to some of you from the movie Sleepless in Seattle. And I'm sure that for some of you attending in the middle of the night right now, you identify with being sleepless in virtual Seattle. So thank you for everybody who's joining us for this plenary. And let's get started. First speaker, please.
America, I believe that Steve Del Bianco has his hand raised.
Okay, Steve, please ask the question.
Hey, thank you. So I'm Steve Del Bianco with the business constituency, and my question has to do with DNS abuse. So in addressing DNS abuse, it's become clear that there's not a single comprehensive definition that we can come up with because, well, DNS abuse takes different forms of use of domain names to deceive and defraud internet users. In other words, it's an arms race with clever criminals. And as the SAC has said a few times, any definition has to be flexible enough to accommodate changing abuse vectors that occur over time. I definitely want to acknowledge that voluntary endeavors by contract parties are laudable and very promising, but they cannot replace an industry-wide requirement to mitigate DNS abuse, because after all, our role is to set a minimum standard for all registrars and not just rely on good registrars to do the right thing, as grateful as we are that many of them do. So hand in hand with that role, ICANN compliance has got to enforce those contracts. And if the contracts are, even as compliance and some registrars have said, insufficient for ICANN to steward DNS in the public interest, ICANN has got to be prepared to renegotiate the registry contracts to better do its job. So I'd close by asking the board, would you support and encourage contractual revisions for ICANN to remain a viable steward of the DNS in the face of an evolving battle over DNS abuse? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for your question. And I think, as you may have noted, there's been quite a few discussions on DNS abuse, not just this week, but of course in all of the previous ICANN meetings and forums. I believe that it definitely has to be a community effort. So the community, it is up to the community, right, to really decide what the policies will be overall. But I will also ask and invite some of my board colleagues to add to this if anybody has an additional reply. Becky, please.
Thanks. Steve, thank you for the question. That's a discussion that we've had a couple of times this week. And I think that we have heard from ICANN Compliance that it believes it has the tools it needs to enforce the current obligations with respect to DNS abuse. But the community decided on or adopted new policies and additional tools were required, then it would very much be part of the process to look at getting those tools into the contracts. But as I said, we've asked this question several times directly to ICANN Compliance, and we have heard unequivocally that they believe they have the tools they need to enforce the current provisions of the contract.
Becky, thank you for that. And this is Steve, just following up briefly to suggest that I hope that you would invite those of us in the community who become aware of complaints of DNS abuse that have not been addressed. And then when compliance tells us that the scope of their reach is in the way, there goes my dogs again, that the scope of, if the scope of their powers is limiting the ability to enforce, then we will bring that evidence both to you and to org and to compliance, because you don't want to just entirely ask compliance, since they may not agree with what the community feels about the proper scope of DNS abuse. Thank you.
So Steve, let me just say, I agree absolutely. And my dog is barking in response to your dog.
Thank you for that. And I do see
Thank
that
you.
John's hand is up.
As Becky said, it might have been so that we have had this particular discussion a couple of times. And one of the things I would like to point to is the official reporting from compliance when it comes to how many complaints we get, which is a good indicator of the amounts we get. But I want to be more positive. There are things that's happened. And for instance, a while back ago, the from compliance through ICANN, we did actually propose a contractual change in the registry's agreement to give access to more data, to make it possible to get access to the data into the DAR system. And I'm happy to say, and I posted that in the link, that we will now do that contractual change, will make the DAR system even better than it is. And I would like to thank the contracted parties for that positive contribution. And I think that's part of what you're looking for. Concrete works that we do together to ensure that the community also knows about the work we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorn. And I've also been reminded to just state that follow-ups should be re-entered in the queue. So thank you. Next up is Griffin Barnett.
Thanks, everyone. This is Griffin Barnett, participating from Washington, D.C. I'm a member of the IPC, but speaking in an individual capacity. Earlier this week, the GNSO Council approved the EPDP Phase 2A final report, despite no votes from the IPC, the BC, and the NOMCOM appointed representative for the non-contracted parties house. The recommendations in this report were designated as having consensus, despite opposition on many of the recommendations from many in the community. There were minority statements filed by IPC, BC, GAC, ALAC, SSAC, and others. Substantively, the report provides for no mandatory requirements and does not serve the public interest in its findings on two fundamental substantive issues in the Phase 2A charter by not requiring differentiation in natural versus legal person data processing consistent with GDPR, and not requiring publication of a pseudonymized rather than anonymized or web form registrant email, which is sorely needed to re-enable cross-domain correlation, which is instrumental to anti-abuse, law enforcement, and cybersecurity efforts. I appreciate that there are risks with these approaches to contracted parties under GDPR, but no commercial enterprise operates free of risk, and ICANN, as a whole, must take greater consideration of the broader public interest in ensuring a WHOIS system that adequately enables the legitimate purposes associated with maintaining the security and health of the DNS ecosystem. I encourage the board to, and trust that it will, properly discharge its obligation to promote the global public interest and further its security and stability mission by not simply rubber stamping what a very broad swath of the community so clearly rejects. Thank you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate your comment and question. So thank you very much for that. And of course, the board is taking very serious consideration of all of these points. So thank you.
Hi. Next, we have a question from the Q&A pod from Robert Nakambwe, a ICANN 72 fellow. Welcome. How does ICANN reconcile the issue of serving a global community and yet gets into silent mode when some governments shut down the entire internet? Does the internet remain secure, stable, and resilient in those communities where it is inaccessible?
Thank you very much for this question. So I open it up to some of my board colleagues who would like to respond. So Martin, please.
Sure, yes. Well, unfortunately, ICANN's role is really to provide this open end-to-end addressing system to the world. And we are not to tell governments what to do, even when we personally would feel that we might have an opinion about it. We're not a political organization. Our focus is truly on the technical facilitation of the internet.
Thank you for that, Martin. Okay, next up is Ashley Roberts.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So I'm Ashley Roberts and I work for ComLaude. So I'm aware that no decision's been made yet on the format for ICANN 73, but I'm interested on how the board is going to make its decision on whether there's any kind of face-to-face element for that meeting. So I've got two questions related to that. Firstly, are there any specific metrics that you're going to use to help inform your decision-making process, both for ICANN 73 and for any other future meetings? And the second question, is it possible to share those metrics and how they're being assessed on an ongoing basis? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Martin, please.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, an important one, because as you know, we thrive in also the face-to-face meetings, which hasn't been possible for quite some time. We do take a risk mitigation-based approach, and we do take into account, in particular for understanding the risk landscape, indicators that are globally accessible, like for instance, the CDC indicators from the US, where there's 4 indicators rating from COVID-19 very high, level 4, to low. On level 4 and level 3, we find that it would be irresponsible to have an ICANN meeting. On level 2 and 1, we feel that we may be able to facilitate it depending on local circumstances and with adequate measures. Another factor we look at is, for instance, also international SOS. And we are aware that also local circumstances are, of course, important. But for sure, when we get together, we will be still in a situation where we will need to take into account that COVID is still around, and measures like vaccinations, requirement, masks, and physical distancing will be a prerequisite, as well as probably on-site temperature checks and COVID testing. And facilities will need to have the right ventilation qualities, as well as staff that is also well prepared. And then next to what's happening local, we're also aware that we need to look into the international travel viability. What is the danger of traveling internationally? And is it possible to travel internationally in terms of cross-border travel, open for essential travel, etc.? So while the board is eager to resume public meetings for the clear benefits of collaboration, communication, and camaraderie, human factor, it's not willing to do so at the expense of the community or staff. And we will continue to evaluate the risks, the variability of travel, and the condition on which it's reasonable to resume on these factors that I mentioned before. I hope this helps.
Thank you very much for your reply, Martin. And next up, we have a question from Mason Cole.
Hi, thank you. This is Mason Cole, Chair of the Business Constituency. My question is as follows. ICANN assured 3 meetings ago that a restart of implementation of the PPSAI policy was imminent. A year later, however, it is not restarted, and it apparently is not on the horizon. We learned earlier today that it is being held up due to the SAD ODP, despite assurances that the development of the ODP process would not impinge on implementation of community work. What is the rationale for further delay, and when, specifically, will ICANN follow through on this assurance? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mason. And for some of you that may not know what PPSAI is, it's the Privacy Proxy Services Accreditation Implementation. And so which one of my board colleagues would like to answer? Anyone? So, I mean, we have had many discussions that there have been many recommendations that have been pending for a while. And we just had a recent discussion today and several others also regarding, prioritization and working through everything that all the recommendations that the community's been making over the last 2 years. So I do very much appreciate this question, and I will invite Becky to give some further context.
So we are obviously aware that this recommendation, the PPSAI recommendation and implementation, was a point of active discussion in the EPDP process, including controller, joint controller, independent controller issues, and access to non-public personal contact details. The GNSO Council has sent a communication to org noting that they don't identify any bar from policy perspective to continuing implementation. The July 2021, so a couple months ago, letter said in conclusion, based on the analysis and the impacts identified in the WAVE report, there are no required updates or any bar to continuing implementation. So we have a relatively recent communication from the council saying no current bars. This is obviously a critical piece of the consideration that we have right now underway with respect to resource prioritization. And one of the things that we want to do is to look at focusing on finishing EPDP phase 1, which is a critical center of resources for org and the community. And this work is part of moving privacy proxy forward. So along with that, and in addition to the discussions that we are having on the SSAT as part of the operational design phase, I think there will be forward momentum, but it makes sense to coordinate all of this with all of the other relevant pieces of work that are going on in the community, and respect to which this has some dependencies.
Thank you very much for that reply, Becky. Okay, next up, we have a question from Owen Smigelski.
Hi, thank you. My name is Owen Smigelski. I am with the Registrar Namecheap. I'm Vice Chair for Policy with Registrar Stakeholder Group. However, I am speaking in my personal capacity. I've been involved with ICANN since about 2007. And one common thing I've heard joked about a couple of times was that John Postel was either a pure genius or mad genius in creating the multi-stakeholder model. Pure genius in that he came up with a way to create policy across a broad cross-section of interests coming together to find common ground acceptable to all. Others say he was an evil genius because there's no way to get such a diverse group of interests to agree to anything. I'm eternally an optimist, so I choose to believe the former. I have noted, however, with great disappointment, that over the past several years, individuals and groups are attempting to subvert the multi-stakeholder model because they did not achieve 100% of their goals with the policy process and reject the results and claim that the multi-stakeholder model is broken. That is not true. The very essence of the multi-stakeholder model is compromise and consensus. Did the Registrar Stakeholder Group support each phase of the EPDP? Yes. Did we love absolutely every recommendation? Of course not. But we supported these policy efforts because we believe in ICANN and the multi-stakeholder model. It saddens me to see individuals and groups attempting to subvert the ICANN policy process by going to the board to getting to overcome policy recommendations, lobbying governments for action, GNSO counselors who vote against reports, not for process issues, but rather unhappiness with the results, or blog posts complaining about how the multi-stakeholder model is broken. All of these are disingenuous, go against the multi-stakeholder model, and are hurtful to the many people who create these policies through thousands of hours of work. At worst, this is potentially threatening to the legitimacy of ICANN. ICANN and the multi-stakeholder model are not perfect, but it's the best solution that we have to reach policies that help the global internet. There are other policy initiatives ongoing right now that myself and other registrars and participants are working on right now, with lots of opportunities to make great policies. Let's stop focusing on claimed failures and realize that together we can work together to make the multi-stakeholder model stronger and achieve good results. Thank you.
Owen, thank you very much for your comments, and definitely noted. I am very like-minded. I'm an internal optimist. So thank you for that. All right, I think up next we have Martin Sutton. Martin?
Sorry, can you hear me, Marie?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. It's Martin Sutton from the Brown Registry Group. We've heard quite a lot this ICANN meeting about work that's in the pipeline, and one particular area of focus is the subsequent procedures, which is now passed to the board for review and decision. And you've recently kicked off the operational design phase, which is now spread over a 10-month period. So probably further than the expectations of the working group participants that created the outputs over a number of years. So one of the things that would be of interest and was raised during the Brown Registry Group session on Monday was to make sure that we keep to timelines that are now put forward by the board to complete this operational design phase, including the additional 3-month ramp-up stage that's been added to the front of this. And I think it would be helpful also if the board could provide sort of a breakdown of its expectations and any targets or deliverables that you're expecting to track over that period of time, so that we can make sure that it does remain on track and items are being delivered as expected during that process, rather than find that it over or delays further than the 10 months. I'd also ask if there is a possibility for the board to consider what it thinks are complex issues that need to be addressed from the outputs of subsequent procedures, and perhaps consider how we could achieve some of those or address some of those whilst the ODP is in progress. So perhaps referring back to the community, any items where it will need further input to overcome any complex issues that have not been answered within the very significant outputs of subsequent procedures working group. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin, and some very important considerations for sure. So I will invite my board colleagues to see, who would like to answer this particular question.
This is Aubrey. I'm happy to take a crack at it. It's a very difficult question. I think, first of all, yes, there is every intention within the board, I believe, to keep to the schedule that we've got now, if at all possible. And as such, the best we can do is basically keep tracking the various milestones, the various times as they go along. As the schedule gets better set after the ramp up, we'll have more and more items that we can track and such. Tracking it, definitely the end state of it and the end date of it. In terms of the complex questions, I think you find many of those expressed in the plan for the ODP, that those questions, that are being explored by the org side of the organization are largely an expression of questions and complexities that we and the board saw specifically in the sub-pro caucus. There are other of the policy issues that the sub-pro caucus will be going through. You know, some of the obvious ones are, you know, the closed generics open issue, and the auctions issue, and many others. There's a list of them, and so as we're going through those, certainly we will reach out to the community when we get to points of we hit an ambiguity, we hit something that we don't understand. One of the things that we want to try and avoid is reopening up new policy areas, new policy discussions, new sub policy discussions that would tend to confuse things even more. But if that needs to happen, I assume we would do so. And I've reached the end of my time.
Thank you very much for that, Avri. And I want to thank all of the folks that have asked questions or made comments so far. And I will now hand it over to my board colleague, Lido, who will be, lead the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Marike. I hope you can hear me well. I will say a few words in Spanish, if you allow me, before taking back the line. So, quería dirigirme sobre todo a la comunidad en general, especialmente a mis colegas de la región latinoamericana y el Caribe, pero en general a toda la comunidad. Hemos tenido 3 semanas de intenso trabajo alrededor de ICANN 72 y durante este evento hemos tenido varias reuniones, hemos escuchado preguntas, comentarios de muchas de las partes interesadas. Y el directorio ha estado muy atento y seguirá atento a todas estas preguntas y comentarios. Estos se toman nota y luego se discuten apropiadamente en los grupos correspondientes dentro de la Junta Directiva. Así que agradecemos e invitamos a que participen con sus preguntas. Vuelvo al inglés en este momento. Thank you. So, we will go to the question and answers in the poll. Please, Rachel.
Thank you. Before I read the question, I just want to remind all the participants, especially if you are reading a statement, to speak as slowly and clearly as possible so all of our community can understand it, and so that our interpreters and translators can keep up. So now I'm going to go to the question and answer pod. We have a question from Nigel Hickson, a GAC representative from the UK. In relation to a return to a hybrid format in San Juan, will the board also take into consideration the precedents being set by the ITU in New York and Geneva and the UN IGF in Katowice, Poland?
Okay. Thank you for the question. I see Martin's hand.
Yes, no, sure. Thank you, Nigel, for the question. Obviously, we're not alone in this, and we are looking to what's happening in the world around us. But we still will take and we need to take our own responsibility. Maybe, Leon, you want to add a little bit to that?
Yes, Martin, thank you very much. So as June will be aware soon, there is a board operational priority for next year in regard to trying to transition into hybrid meetings and to in-person meetings at some level. As part of the board's work along with org, we are coordinating closely to gather as much input and information as possible to ensure that whatever transition we do in our meetings setup is first and utmost safe for everyone. And we, as Martin said previously, we have as paramount principle to keep the members of our community, staff, and the board free of risk, or at least with the lesser risk possible. So yes, we are looking into examples of how other institutions are handling hybrid meetings, how They are putting in place different measures and technologies to allow inclusive participation from those that are not on site, and of course mitigating the different risks that entail holding a meeting with an in-person component. So yes, Nigel, we will be looking at this very closely, and of course willing to learn from others' experience in this topic. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, Leon. Just to reassure, that is a topic that is, I would say, almost on the top of the agenda of the board. So Rachel, shall we go to another Q&A question, please?
Sure, thank you. ICANN's strategic plan for fiscal year 2021 to 2025 sets out to improve the effectiveness of ICANN's multi-stakeholder model of governance. It acknowledges that there is a risk that limited resources could impact the ability for stakeholders to participate, which could compromise the credibility and integrity of the multi-stakeholder model. ICANN has been making significant efforts to reach out to underserved regions in various ways, but there is still significant room for improvement from the perspective of small island developing states. There is a need to consider the establishment of a cross-community working group focused on small island developing states as an underserved region. SIDS is not considered a region within the ICANN community, but it is a community established within global processes such as the United Nations. The objective would be to allow for the effective pooling of resources to support small island developing states' interaction with the wider community. And that question was from Rodney Taylor of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union.
Yeah.
Lito, I think you might be on mute.
I answer this.
I'm going to make an executive decision and say yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the suggestion, Rodney. I will ask Sally Costerton who handles this and reach out to you and have a discussion with you. So thank you.
All right, our next question is from the Q&A pod from Wisdom Doncor. What is the state of the ICANN Open Data Initiative? When is it going to be operationalized? If the initiative is still in the plan, what is ICANN doing to make sure the community capacity is built and empowered?
Yaron, would you like me to take that one?
That was so quick of you. Thank you.
Yes, this is Sally Cohen for the record. Currently, we have several different data sets available on Open Data. It's very much an ongoing initiative. Today, we have the domain name marketplace indicators available on Open Data. Some of the ITHI health indicators, although we have more data sets to add here. There are the per registrar transaction reports that are available and registry function actions reports. We're also going to be putting registry agreements up, but we are working through some of the bugs there. What we will be doing is coming back and providing a more robust roadmap to share with the community, because we have been focused on kind of working through some of these bugs, but it's very much still an ongoing initiative. So thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I apologize. My Zoom was crashing, so I got frozen. I hope it won't happen again. So Rachel, can we go to the next question, please?
Yes. This one is from Niccolo Passaro, an ICANN 72 fellow from Italy. The complexity and interdisciplinary nature of the great dilemmas present in the network makes it difficult to act according to a program plan that could unify these dilemmas and allow the users to contribute with appropriate projects. I'm trying to make an agenda about this complexity. Would the creation of a true Internet Sustainable Development Goals agenda be an idea in line with ICANN's values, both technical and policy development, to unify topics just like data cybersecurity, intellectual property, good information, artificial intelligence, and so on.
Thank you, Nicola, for the question. While I wait for someone, if somebody wants to answer, I will venture and say that ICANN is very interested in all matters that relate to internet, but within the limits or the boundaries of its mission and vision. So we will, I think I'm right to say that we will accompany and we will be watching all of these developments from our perspective. Anyone else would like to add anything?
I think you said it perfectly, Lito. Of course, these subjects may come up in the community and may want to be discussed, but it's not right. It's not where our focus will be in terms of measures. According to our bylaws, we're limited to the mission. So I think it's very good questions, and probably a forum like IGF would be even better to dive deeper into this. And in that, I would gladly participate.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Nicola, for the question. Next, we will go to James Bladel. James, please.
Hi, good day. This is James. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, fantastic. Well, I'm James Bladel. I'm with GoDaddy, but speaking, these are my personal comments. I wanted to first applaud and echo the sentiments made by my colleague Owen Smigelski earlier regarding the health and the strength and the viability of the multi-stakeholder model. I think we all come here to reinforce this and the health of this ecosystem. And everything he said, I think, is something that we should be watching. There's one other threat, however, I want to mention, which is that ICANN, the pace of work that is occurring currently within ICANN Oregon in the community is, I believe, also a strain on the model and the credibility of the org and the community. You know, if a baby were born during the last application round for new GTLDs, and she would be well into high school before she would have any hope of registering a domain name in the next round of GTLDs. And that pace of work is not contextually appropriate for something like the internet. And I think it calls into question our ability as a community to effectively manage the DNS and keep it relevant to today's internet. And I just want to close by noting that there's a lot of excitement around alternative technologies, that the same technologies that have been brought to bear against governments and central banks are being targeted now at ICANN as a way to bypass some of these bottlenecks. And I think we need to be aware that this is occurring, and we need to be sounding the alarm that the pace of work needs to continue to increase, and ICANN needs to deliver on its abilities, you know, to keep the DNS relevant for its the demands of the current users, or we're going to lose the whole thing. And I'm concerned about that. And I think all of us should be concerned about that. So thanks, and again, +1 to Owen.
Thank you, James. Becky, would you like to add?
Yeah, I just want to start by acknowledging what James has said, which is something that the board has heard loud and clear across the community this week. It is something that the board is, in fact, quite engaged in, and org is quite engaged in. We don't have, we wish things were moving more quickly than they are right now, but we do believe that we have put in place the mechanisms to move things along in a efficient, expeditious manner And we will be counting on the community to work with us in those ways. So I mean, rather than rehashing what we've said to every single part of the community, because this has been a question for every single part of the community, let me just assure you that both the board and org are concerned about the pace and to create the mechanisms and tools that we need to move forward on critical issues. We are keenly aware of the risk that by taking too long, people will figure out ways to route around ICANN. And that is a problem that we need to pay attention to. So thank you for raising those issues again, and please be assured, as I think we have tried to assure folks in our conversations this week, that this is very much at the top of our list.
Thank you, Becky. Avery, would you care to add a few words?
Yes, thank you. Very much support what Becky said. The other thing that I wanted to add, and I think it's something that we're still learning, that gets pointed out by people, and it is something that both, you know, the board and org are working on, is that as the scale of what we're doing increases, as the outreach of what we're doing increases, as the number of, you know, participants who have relatively fixed positions increases, we have to learn how to deal with it better. And I do think that both the board and the org and the community at large, through the various multi-stakeholder improvement programs, are working on this. So I just wanted to say that it isn't just that it's hard to do, and it is getting harder to do because we are having to learn to scale up to an additional scope of opinion and scope of work. So appreciate any effort that comes through. And yes, deadlines are really good things as forcing functions, and very much agree. But when we miss them, you know, it is something that we need to look at, understand why, and then move on with the next deadline. Thanks.
Thank you, Avery and Becky and James, for the question. Rachel, can we read the question from Yoshi Murakami in the Q&A, please?
Yes. The next question. Oh, before I read that, I'd just like to remind everybody to, if you're planning to speak, to turn off your notifications on your computer. Thank you. So this question from Yoshi Murakami from Komlade, Japan. We have heard ICANN's CEO and members of the board refer repeatedly to the importance of the next round of new GTLDs to bringing users online in their native languages and scripts. I am Japanese, and I know of a number of companies who are expressing an interest in applying for a new GTLD. Those companies find it very difficult to understand why there is no clear timeline to the next round, clear commitment on whether there will be a next round, and not even a clear timeline on when we might expect such a commitment. The lack of any certainty makes it difficult for potential Japanese applicants to garner internal support, plan, and budget. These difficulties will be even greater, I believe, in some of the less well-resourced countries that the org talks about wanting to bring online. I understand that org will complete the ODP before the board will make any decision, but can we please have a clear commitment to a date on which that will happen?
Thank you for the question. This relates to the whole SOPRA process and ID and the use of IDN characters. I don't see.
Happy to take that.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Yes. We are now at the ODP phase, and with you, we agree it's important to provide as much certainty as we can, as soon as we can do it. So very much with you on that. And right now, we just don't know yet. So we need to make sure that once we give an indication, it's an indication that's a reasonable one with reasonable certainty. We're not there yet.
Okay. Akinori, would you like to say anything?
Yes, thank you very much. In addition to what Martin mentioned, I appreciate Murakami-san that you mentioned that the inclusion of the local languages by the IDN, and then my understanding is that the second round of the new GTD would be the more with the more focus on the such IDN inclusion. Then we really expect the much more application by the IDN than that which will solve the inclusion on of the diverse language circumstances of the in this globe. Thank you very much for the pointing it out. Thanks. ありがとうございました.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Akinori. We'll go next to Mark Datisgel. Please, Mark.
Thank you very much. This is Mark Datisgel speaking, GNSO Council with the BC. This is a comment that's more from myself, though. So over the past few years, we of course have had a difficult time coordinating. It's great that our community managed to hold strong for all this time, but moving forward, as we head into the hybrid meetings and potentially get back to face-to-face, we will hopefully see an influx of new people. We'll hopefully see people who haven't been active coming back to the ICANN work. So something that I would like to request would be that ICANN.org help us by creating some sort of roadmap, some sort of thing that we can point towards as where we are as a community. To give you an example, within the GNSO Council, Barry Cobb always produces an action decision radar that kind of keeps us informed of everything that's going on at any given time. And it's incredibly helpful for us to see the many moving pieces that are going on within ICANN at any given time. To me, this should be more of a community resource, especially as we ramp up, and we have been really only the most interested people and the chairs and the people who are really involved in ICANN have been very present this past 2 years. A lot of people have been following from the sidelines or have quit altogether. So it would be really good if this could become more of a ICANN-wide policy that we are actually able. I know that ITI has been making some very interesting progress in that sense, but it would be great to have something to point towards for everybody coming back. This is where we are. This is what we have to do, and get a sense of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I have seen during these 3 weeks something along the lines that you are proposing, and we are conscious that we need to improve what we can in this area. So we all get updated and get a sense on where we are in each one of our tasks. Anyone would like to add anything?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, the level of transparency that ICANN has, including org, admittedly creates a little bit of a problem because it's a lot of data. I think I marketed the CEO report. We have the policy report. We have individual implementation reports. We have a lot of different reports. And at the same time, as you mentioned, the ITI project where we're trying to rebuild this airplane while it's in air with 200,000 documents that we have to index. But I take your comments for what it is, because I agree with you. Transparency should not lead to confusion. There is also, and we should make sure that we get better at it. So it's been interesting for me and my staff and the board to think about this, because it's as you mentioned, there are so many things going on, but we need to better ourselves. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Mark, for the question. And next, can we go to Rachel and read Michael Ballon's question, please, in the Q&A?
Sure. This question is from Michael Ballon, a member of the RRSG, speaking in his own capacity. I understand that networking is very difficult during these remote ICANN meetings. What I don't understand is that it's made even more difficult due to many sessions being in a Zoom webinar style, where it's not possible to see who else is participating, and it is impossible to send a private message to other participants. Compared to a face-to-face meeting, this would mean keeping most of the people separate in their own cage, with no way to see who's sitting left or right to them. A hopefully unthinkable situation. I would kindly ask to not use the webinar style, or at least keep it to an absolute minimum.
Thank you, Michael. I can assure you we have also been discussing about this, but I will let, I think, Goran to take it.
When we hear you loud and clear, and this is something we definitely can discuss. Just to give you a little bit of background, it's been important for different parts and also for the board. For instance, when the board has a conversation with a part of the community, which is done in a public session, but it's really between the board and that constituency, so we could, that's one of the reasons for that format. But I hear you, and we will, of course. I mean, we are here to support the community. So the community feels they can interact with each other. So let us come back on that question. Also speak to the planning committee for coming into the next ICANN meeting. I actually rather have figured out a way to meet face to face, to be honest.
Thank you, Joran. I think you covered the sentiment, the common sentiment. Okay, it's time for me to pass it on to Ron Da Silva. He will be conducting the last part of the public forum. Thank you. Ron?
Thank you, Lito. Fabulous job. I just felt like I should come back to the comment that Medica kicked it off with regarding where she is and where this meeting was supposed to be, because
you've got mail.
I used to work there, and it was kind of fun. Like the movie coming out was a huge publicity thing for everybody that that was working back in the day at AOL, and just to kind of connect the dots there. So Medica, you're my sleepless in Seattle. I'm over here where AOL's headquarters were, and a lot of the infrastructure used to exist that supported all that stuff. So it's kind of fun. But that said, you know, I gotta also just commend Martin for being brave. See, he's elected to pick the outgoing board members to host the public forum today, and nobody's really taking advantage of that. See, because today you get asked all kinds of crazy questions, and you can't take us in the, you know, we're not going to get pulled into the back room afterwards and pummeled by our colleagues because we said something wrong. So I'm just sort of kind of instigating a little bit to encourage you to you know, speak up. With Medica, Lito, and Nigel and I leaving, it's definitely been a pleasure serving the community and in our capacity on the board, and it's a delight to be able to host one more public forum. So that said, I'm going to move on to Chad Falconing.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for your time and attention. My name is Chad Falconing. I'm from the beautiful Boca Raton, Florida, here down in close to Miami, the new crypto capital of the world. I'm here. I started in the domain space in 1996, before ICANN existed, and we wanted legitimacy as an asset class. And when IRA Magaziner put out the proposal, I was one of the very few that actually went to the White House to discuss kind of how do we kind of wrap this new technology out around there. So I appreciate everybody's time and attention. You know, 20 some years later, here we are. I'm here on the capacity of just as a member of the Handshake community, which is a decentralized, open source and transparent technology P2P naming system here. And why I got involved with that was the amount of people involved into it, and to see the new technology evolve, where we're at now. And so one of the main goals today was to address that ICANN is hopefully aware that there's about a $7 million no obligation resources sitting there for them to take. This was created when the thing was created in February 2020. And now that value is approximately $6 to $7 million available for ICANN just to claim and use however they want. Feed the hungry kids, put it back to the community, whatever they want to do with it. So that's one of our main goals. They're sitting there for that. You take that in there. There's now with Handshake, there's approximately 2 million domains registered on that. And why we support that is the creativity. With the current situation, you either have to have $250,000 to create a GTLD. That limits the creativity. And with this system, you can actually have anybody create their own identity and creativity in that system. So we just really wanted to put this on record that there is a nice sizable pot free, no obligation to come claim. And we want to work with the ICANN community to put those good resources. So my appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Chad, thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention and putting that offer out there. Anybody from the board want to respond, or from org? If not, thanks.
I maybe want to point out that the names he represents doesn't resolve in what we call the internet. Thank you very much.
Okay. Question from the pod, I think. Rachel.
Yes, this is a comment. My name is Siva Subramaniam. I am from NameShop, located in India, which has the application for .internet, an application that has now been waiting for delegation for over 8 years now. I have written to ICANN seeking attention and requesting that the board and CEO act upon and delegate .internet speedily. This TLD will serve the global public interest as described in NameShop's many published letters and papers. I wish to request, in particular, the attention of ALAC and GAC leadership on this matter, as the NameShop public interest commitments align with the principles and mission of each of these organizations. I hope these important advisory committees take formal note of the communication we have sent to them to describe our commitments in how .internet is operated. NameShop will make these commitments contractually binding. In addition, we commit to an ongoing conversation and involvement with the DNS community to receive its advice and evolve .internet's mission and its potential for good. Especially in the short term, NameShop looks forward to working with the merits and the combined strength of the DNS community in this last phase of pandemic management, soon to move on to a phase of renewal. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think regarding current status of names and requesting communiques with the organization, it's probably best to hand it over to Joran.
I have a feeling that I might have answered this question before. And we have discussed this with you many times. And we have talked about why this application, according to the rules of ICANN, is unable to proceed. And I'm looking forward to talk to you again, but also with my team. Thank you very much.
Do we have another question, Rachel, in the queue?
We do. Thank you. This one is from Amir. What would be the relation of ICANN with the UN initiatives like SG Roadmap for Digital Cooperation and Common Agenda? What will be the future of cooperation or competition between ICANN and UN and ITU regarding digital policy issues?
Yeah, this is a great question. I know we've spoken many times about the intersection between ICANN, its remit, and other organizations like the ITU. And in fact, if you remember a couple of years ago, there was an intentional effort by the organization to join one of the sectors in the ITU as a technical participant. And that intersection, I think, is continues to be important, because there are certain things that are important to our community and certain things that are important to the ITU, and there's not always overlap, but sometimes there is, and it's good to be there to ensure that the things that are important to us are well explained, articulated, defended if needed, and continue on in their separate spaces. But this is something that primarily is taken on by the organization. Joran, do you want to talk a little bit about our engagement?
You gave a perfect answer. And yes, we are members of the ITUD. ITUD is the place in the ITU when they talk about what it stands for: development, capacity building, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the place where ICANN again engages with the ITU. We also, of course, have other relationship with ITU, and also a lot of member states who speaks for us in the ITU, which I think is hopefully very important now. On the question when it comes to the UN initiatives, like the SG roadmap for digital cooperation and common agenda, we will always support we will always support any initiatives where it comes to having more people connected to one common internet, where all the names are resolved. Sorry, and this is something that I think that we are not in the capacity building business for connectivity. We are not in the business of content, but many times we engage because it helps the legislators and governments to understand what is needed to be done. So a very good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Joran. Do we have another question in the Q&A pod? Rachel?
We do. This one is from Andrei Sheherbovich, an ICANN 72 fellow. I'd like to share concern about the hybrid meetings. I think we should move forward as possible toward restoring face-to-face meetings. Is it possible to create a paper outlining exact numbers of COVID threat preventing to organize it, i.e. all vaccinated in face-to-face?
Yeah, a great topic that I know everybody shares, that sentiment of when can we all be back to normal, right? And unfortunately, this is the new normal. We are dealing in COVID issues across the globe, and even here in our community and at ICANN. Agree, we'd love to be face to face, but we're taking certain precautions, and I think it'd probably be best to let Martin speak about how the board's going to move forward with that and how we're working with the organization on that strategy.
Yes, not wanting to repeat what I told earlier about how we go about with risks. I think it's very important to recognize that the virtual meetings didn't only bring us the ability to progress our work when we couldn't meet, but it also provided opportunity for people to participate that would never have been able to meet, COVID or not. And we've learned to interact in different ways. So for sure, we'll keep that. We'll try to keep the best of that integrated wherever we are in the years down the road. And with that, the hybrid meeting is also something that basically we've done already for a long time. Only virtual was a byline. I think what we'll see moving forward is that we'll try to facilitate better than before the integration and useful participation of both those in the room and those online.
Thank you, Martin. Why don't we go? I think we still have some more in the Q&A, but I'm going to pivot over to, I see Martin Sutton's come back to the queue. Martin.
Hi, everyone. Martin Sutton here, Brand Registry Group. I was just following on from the earlier question that I put to the board, and following some of the chat that I saw posted. I was just wanting to hone in on the cost of the operational design phase for SubPro. That's a significant sum of 9 million that was quoted to conduct the assessment phase. I think if you add on the costs of the subsequent procedures working group activity over the multi-year time frame, that it probably does come into multiple millions already when you consider the volunteer work, staff work, and all the activities that were undertaken during that period of time. So that's a significant investment in financial terms, and one that's looming ahead as well with the ODP. Looking at Avri's response, it just prompted me to think that, you could go through this whole process and then the board decides not to proceed with subsequent procedures. And I just wonder if the board's thought about what would be the reasons where they would not decide to go ahead with it, and whether there is a question or a set of questions that needs to be teased out first of all before spending another multi-million pound budget, so that would save one, a load of work if you decide that you're not going to do it. And it means, so on a fiduciary basis, that is important to the board. I'm just worried that we're going down a process here which could lead us to, many people that were involved disappearing. So the institutional knowledge disappears that we built up over the last 10 years. Plus the financial side of this thing, that if it all goes to waste, that's not good. That is definitely not good. So is there any decisions that can be brought forward, or part decisions that can be brought forward to add that certainty and predictability, and on the basis then that this is a valuable spend to incur?
Martin,
Thanks,
thank
Ron.
you. Yeah, thank you for that, Martin. I was kind of surprised with the pivot in your question. Namely, is there a scenario where we're not going to do something with this? And that actually is kind of an interesting question, because I don't think we've had any discussions about not doing it, right? It's always been about how to do it. So with that said, I'll now punt it over to our CEO. Joran, do you want to respond to it?
Okay, I can start, and I think Avri can, or Becky, or actually most of the board can add on to it. Just to say something, I mean, last year we talked about it. It took about 4 years, and I wasn't here, so I can't really vouch for it, to do it. And the ODP was done after the board decision, and many of you complained that it was, and I agree with that, it was not transparent and there was no cost control on it. And that's, the ODP doesn't add to the time. I actually do believe it will save time and it will save money to do it, but we still have to do a preparation. The second thing is, it's a little bit of a technicality in that sense that I can't assign people to the working on the next round without financing it from a budget. And that is because this round has to be outside our operations budget. So if I move Teresa over to this one, it actually gives, that cost will be assigned into the cost of the project. And of course, diminish a little bit the cost in the operations side. So that's one of the reasons why you actually see cost in it. We have to finance it that way according to the recommendations. I also want to say, yes, I'm eternally grateful for the ICANN community who spent so much time and so much hours on this one. And of course, that has a cost. We should also know that when we're looking at the total cost for this program, we are talking about in a range of about $350, $400 million in total. So I think that an investment in that to make sure that we have control when we go to the board of the potential cost and timeline is a well investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Any other comments? I think Avri? Sure.
Yes, thank you. And I should have raised my hand, but yeah, this is Avri speaking. So first of all, to answer the question, no, there is no intent that if X, we will not approve. I think as Jeff says it very well in his comment, it would be going against an established policy. It would be going against a recommendation from the GNSO. There is no initial intention to do that. However, at the time the board votes on it, the board by a supermajority needs to decide that going forward, is in the global public interest and that all the I's have been dotted and T's have been crossed. And therefore, it is perhaps presumptuous, certainly preliminary, to say at this date that yes, we will go forward when all of the analysis and the final decision hasn't been made. But other than the ability to answer the question, is this in the global public interest? There is no reason sitting on a table somewhere just waiting to be proven for why this can't be done. This is something where there is a policy. The board can vote to change a policy. However, that intentionality has not existed, but until a decision is made, it's not made. Thanks.
Thank you, Avery. Let's go to the Q&A.
Hi, this is your last call for questions. So if anybody has a question, please either raise your hand or put it in the Q&A pod, please. But in the interim, we have a question that looks like they took Ron up on his offer. And this is a question from Robert Carolina. To any board member who is retiring at the end of this meeting, what has been the most surprising, unexpected thing you've experienced during your tenure on the ICANN board? And please speak slowly.
What a great question. Thank you, Robert. I'll go first, give Medica, Lito, and Nigel an opportunity to come up with something. I come to the board from the numbering community. I've been building infrastructure throughout my career. So coming into the namespace was fascinating in a lot of different areas. But one in particular that I always and probably will always continue to enjoy is all these bizarre stories that are centered around how the two-letter TLDs came into existence. All the country code operators, their history, their experience with how the origins of the two-letter TLDs. I don't know where to begin with that, because like every one of them seems to have like a really interesting origin and how they're connected to the origins of our industry and how that was tied into addressing needs and name needs and networking needs and kind of gluing all that together. And a lot of times in research environments, I would encourage everybody that, if you have an opportunity, you happen to find somebody from one of the country code operators, corner them, buy them a beer, and ask them, tell me about how your country code started. It is always fun. So that said, who wants to go first or second?
I can go.
All right, Lito.
Okay, thank you. Well, following what you said, since I am a CCTLD manager myself, and I was part of the LACNIC board for 9 years too. I was very familiar with both numbers and names. But what surprised me the most, I would say, is something very, very personal. When I joined the board in 2015, 15 in Dublin, I wasn't expecting anything from anybody when the time to join the board, there's a specific time during the AGM, and somebody said that I hadn't realized that I was, and it was true, the first fellow, ICANN fellow to join the board. So for me, that was a very pleasant surprise. I said it was very personal, but ever since I have been very proud of being that first fellow in the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Lito. Medica?
Yeah, thank you. And what a great question. So one of the things that I found really interesting and surprising was just really how very closely connected we are in all of the different internet-related communities. I have been in what I call the internet circus for about 20, 25 years. And very much in the security communities, in the numbers communities, did a lot of work for RIRs, was on the ARIN board just before being elected to be the SOC liaison on the board. And I had I was fortunate enough that when I joined the board, I knew most of the board members and pretty well. I mean, Ron himself was a reviewer of my security book that was published in 2003, right? And a lot of the board members I knew well for at least a decade, just from all of the different multi-stakeholder communities that are there. And so, I found that a little bit surprising, not really, but I think, it's great to see how well we're actually working together as a community during COVID times. I mean, and I mean that really, truly. So thank you for the question, a good one.
Thanks, Medica. Nigel, you up?
Hey, you left me till last, didn't you? I was involved in the discussions that led to ICANN's creation. I was in the CCTLD community when, at least in my perspective, the ICANN board, mildly put, was the Politburo of a very, very top-down organization back in 2002, 2003. Now, that's a long time in the past, but you kind of harbor a lingering suspicion, So the main thing I learned that was surprising, although perhaps in hindsight it shouldn't have been, was to learn how genuinely every single board member that I've worked with in the last 3 years believes in the multi-stakeholder model at a very fundamental level. And this enables me, even though ICANN is not perfect and there's work still to be done, to be very, very proud of this unique thing that we've built working together over the last 25 years. It's been a privilege.
Thank you, Nigel. What an interesting question. Let's move on. I see Werner Staub, your hand is up. Calling you next.
Sorry,
I think you almost had it.
Yeah, is it okay now?
You're good. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to, add this on a note of optimism at the same time as, we have many reasons for alarm as, the difficulties that we face. And specific in the context of the domain abuse, where I see that we make great efforts and at the same time, much of the domain abuse goes even unnoticed. I see that because personally, I see more domain abuse privately than professionally, although I've been in the internet active over 2 decades. And the reason is that new technology is being used by criminals as well, in particular, personal targeting and selective responses. So by the time a security probe or investigation, looks at the domain, that system is already able to tell that there's a security probe and answers with some innocent content. They also have lots of domains available, so using them sparingly, just for a couple of targeted messages each. So they're actually going to go quite unnoticed. So this leads to a situation where we can no longer say that taking down bad domain names is sufficient. We have to also do something else. We have to enable the majority of the internet content providers. Those are the honest ones. We have to enable those to show and demonstrate not only to people, but also to machines that they are safe, and thus enable intermediaries such as social networks, instant messaging applications and so on, to show that this URL can actually safely be clicked on. Maybe in another case, at least it shouldn't be just an invitation to click and thumbnails them as shown that actually mislead users. But there should be some circumspection. And in that way, we could actually help other intermediaries help their own customers, and at the same time actually provide a service to the typical customers of the registries and the registrars who want to show that they have a good reputation. I think this can be a business. This can be something that is a technology that ICANN helps deliver and that the ICANN community makes happen.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Werner, for the topic and the suggestion. We will certainly take that away. This brings us to the end of block 3 for the public forum. So I will relinquish the microphone back over to Martin. All yours.
Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you, Marika. Thank you, Lito, and for doing your very best to the very last moment by moderating this panel. And yes, also thank you for Nigel for all you've done, and thank you to all the community for the good questions asked and the togetherness that is very clear from many of your interactions. Yes, there's things that we need to work on. There's even things we need to continue to improve. And at the same time, there's also things that are embraced as being a positive thing. I really appreciated the sentiment expressed by Owen and others, that it's really recognition of the importance of doing it all together. And I very much hear, and the board has heard very much also your continued interest in meetings, your appreciation that it needs to be safe, but also looking forward to get the best out of it. Obviously, the new round of TLDs has come by for a couple of times and will continue to do so. It is on top of your agenda, even if it doesn't move as fast as you would like. Or for some others of the community, maybe it moves faster than you would like. But we are on top of it, and it's a policy that we're looking in on how to implement. And of course, last but not least, I really and truly and deeply loved Robert Carolina for asking his question to the board members, which gave a good opportunity to express some of the camaraderie and what you can see if you are here to serve the full community in what's been happening. So thank you all very much for this constructive public forum. As you will know, if you've been at ICANN meetings before or for a longer period, in about half an hour, we'll start with the board meeting, the public board meeting, to which you're all dearly invited. And in the meanwhile, wishing you very well and looking forward to see you in person. So thank you all. Thank you, Org, for helping to make this happen. Thank you, Rachel, for being the voice of the people here. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you hopefully in half an hour, and otherwise maybe at a future opportunity.